Okay. Let by working through the Seder, section 118 of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. Okay, the first thing he mentions is that one should do one's best to obtain good wine or cups. If red wine is available and it's got a reliable hefsher, it's kosher, the white wine, then the red wine takes preference of the Seder. Why? Because the pasuk says, Adam, look not after wine when any wine being connected to red, indicating that the most desirable of wine is when it's red. In addition, which flows when Pharaoh slaughtered innocent Jewish children. In backward and ignorant countries where people make slanderous accusations, Jews refrain from using red wine on Pesach. The blood libels, unfortunately, throughout the generations, our accused us of something awful and terrible as far as putting into the wine for Pesach, which couldn't be further from the truth. If there's such a place where there are such libels being made up, then one should avoid red wine. Otherwise, it reminds us both of Pharaoh's torture of the Jewish people. In general, there's a verse that alludes to red wine being the best. That is as far as choice wine and red wine. Now, if you have white wine better than the red wine, then requirement to use red wine. Rather, red wine is preference, but the halacha is that it should just be any wine and wine for the Seder. So that's one thing to prepare. We're getting ready. I remember last year there was a curfew where certain date, and the day before the wine distributors were working around the clock to make time for Pesach, because otherwise it would be illegal to wine. So thank God this year we're not stuck with that, but definitely make sure that you're sorted with wine for Pesach. Next thing you mentioned, to be dipping the karpas, which is potato, onion, or the like, into salt water. People use parsley. Better to use celery, which tastes good when raw, as parsley. And best of all, he says, is radishes. Onions, but you could follow your family customs. So you want to make sure you have to get a potato or onion. Shouldn't be too difficult. It needs to be, the potato would obviously need to be cooked. You just need a small little piece for that step of the Seder. The first step is Kaddish, and we make Kiddush. Urchatz, we wash our hands. Not much. The next step, third step, is Karpas. You want to make sure that you have a vegetable or salt that you can make into water. I guess salt water before Yom Tov. So what do we have next? Then we have Yachatz. Then we do the story. Make sure you've got a Haggadah that you could read along with. Yourself, familiarize yourself with Haggadah. Obviously, in the absence of chametz, take out your Haggadah already now, and when the night of the Seder comes, you will know what is going on. And then hands nachza, and then we eat the matzah, baitzi and matzah. And he says it's customary to use horseradish, which may be grated. If you don't grate the horseradish, to eat it, to actually chew on maror that has not been grated, that is, he actually says the Mishnah verse your health. So that's not a mitzvah, you know. I mean, to actually chew on it is rough. And if you want to just swallow whole pieces, mitzvah. Because if you just swallow a whole piece without chewing it, then you actually don't feel the bitterness. The Gemara speaks about this. You know, maror and grate it in advance of the Seder. We are on Yom Tov, so this should be prepared in advance. Use its strength completely either. So you do want to maybe seal it in some kind of jar. Its strength when it's time to cry might actually have a tear or two. You return home from the synagogue. Interesting. But it should be done in an unusual manner. I thought it should be done before Shabbos, before Yom Tov. You wouldn't have to grate on Yom Tov, but he says you actually can, as long as you do it in an unusual manner. So I would say today, certainly, if you just get one of those airtight jars, then that's sharp. On Shabbos, it is forbidden. Oh, that's right. Prohibit any activity which wouldn't be allowed on Shabbos if it's for the purpose of food. So although on Shabbos you're allowed to grate, on Yom Tov you would be allowed to grate for food. And at the Seder, because if you grated it in advance, it wouldn't be as it will improve the food. And when it comes to Yom Tov, you're allowed to bake or but will taste best if it's done right before. But then again, you don't want to use because you wouldn't be allowed to use electricity on Yom Tov. But again, I would say you would be allowed to grate it that night using usual way, maybe by using a sharp knife or something. But if it's on Shabbos, Pesach is on Shabbos, then you wouldn't because it labors. So then you would grate it in advance. It is preferable to use chazeres lettuce, which is easier to eat and is also called. Why is it called maror? Because when it stays in the ground for a long time, the stem becomes. You can also fulfill the mitzvah with la'ana, which is a certain type of herb. Never heard of that. Okay, that's because some authorities say that this is actually not acceptable. So it's up for debate. So if you want to be covered and have some horseradish, fruit and vegetable stores around the Jewish areas, I'm sure will get stock of it. Pesach, if they don't always have it, or some romaine lettuce. Okay. All the species with which you can fulfill the mitzvah of eating maror may be combined to make up a gazai. So to fulfill the mitzvah on Pesach, so one needs to eat a kazayas, which could be up to 27 grams of maror when doing. You could have partially, that could be partially horseradish and partially the two together can sum up to the amount that you need. You could also use either the leaves or the roots. That is not with the little roots that branch out in all directions, but the large root in the ground is considered a stem. Nevertheless, out of the ground, because some authorities hold that the part that grows in the ground is called root, only if they are fresh. But the stems are valid whether they're fresh or not, or pickled. So I remember once when I ran a Seder in Russia, or in White Russia, and the community wasn't very clued up as far as the laws were concerned, and so they call it chrein. You know what chrein is on your gefilte fish? Horseradish, cooked horseradish, but the cooked horseradish, the chrein, has actually been flavored. It should not be kosher, or they add sugar. It has to be pure horseradish so that you feel the bitterness. And then that does not qualify for the Seder. So as one of what we made wine, make sure you have karpas, a vegetable, make advance of Shabbos. Either way, if you want to use a machine, do that beforehand, but so it doesn't lose its sharpness. Next on the menu is the charoset. A few things in the charoset. Charoset is made of, looks like mortar, and it reminds us of how our forefathers make bricks out of mortar. So how do you make charoset? We'll get to that in a moment. And you could add a little bit of wine or wine vinegar to make it present the blood. And for the additional reason that it should become fit to dip something into it, meaning if it's just two hard pieces, adding a little bit of wine or vinegar, obviously kosher into more of a paste that you could dip into. What's it made of? Fruits that symbolize the Jewish people. Figs, he mentions, just like the Jewish. Nuts, as it says, I went down to the garden. Dates, as the pasuk says, I will ascend the palm tree. All of these things I mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch. I guess it's been a while since I've looked at all. Like a slice of pomegranate apples to commemorate what is you, where the woman gave birth to their children without pain. And watch diligently. Shockates is to watch diligently, and it also means an almond to end up bondage. You should put spices in it that and ginger that are not finely ground, and have straw-like strands in them to record water. Okay, so he mentioned a lot of things over here. Again, family custom, but I think the main ingredients would be apple, maybe pears, and then whatever else, I guess, based on your family custom. On Shabbos, you should not pour wine and the vinegar into the charoset, or it should be done. Rather than putting wine into the charoset, you use the wine. So that has to do with the laws of, I think, pickle or make things sharp. It's a form of preparing food on Shabbos, which may be a problem. The salt water should be prepared before Yom Tov. On Yom Tov, you should do it in an unusual way by first pouring the water as opposed to adding the water onto the salt. So what have we spoken about so far? We've spoken about wine, karpas, we've spoken about maror, we've spoken about charot with nuts and apples and other ingredients. After the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, the sages are there when we say the Haggadah. One to remind us of the past, and the other to remind us of the Korban Chagiga, which was another. Since both of these two different offerings, these animals were brought in temple time, by having two foods on the table that represent them. So one would be made of meat. He says from the to remind us of the Paschal offering, we use the neck of a chicken. To recall that Hashem, blessed be He, redeemed Israel with an outside. You should roast it on fire. Want it to look like you're actually eating the Paschal offering on the night of the Seder. The second food, egg, because an egg in Aramaic is called a beya, and then ba'e means to want in Aramaic, to redeem us. So the same word in Hebrew in Aramaic for egg, beya. So by using an egg, we refer to our Hashem one. Fancy you're shopping this for the Seder, in addition to whatever we mentioned before, the wine, the butter, the salt water, the charosis, you also egg to remind us of the Chagiga offering, the Yom Tov offering, the neck of a chicken, which should be roasted. So rather than you actually roast it, but you don't eat it. So you would do it either, yeah. So, but you must do the roasting or boiling before Yom Tov while it's still day. And if you forgot to do it, then you're allowed to do it on Yom Tov itself if it's not Shabbos, but you'll need to eat it on the same day that you do it. That way, day. So if you forgot to prepare your hard-boiled eggs or your before Yom Tov, on the first night you would do for the first night, and on the second night you would prepare one for the next Seder. Okay. Now, since it's customary not to eat the roasted meat on the 2 nights of the Seder, the meat on Yom Tov during the day, so or not eat it. He mentioned shoulder, but the custom is the neck of a chicken. Don't eat that on the night of you're actually eating the Paschal offering, but you can put that meat aside and eat it. Yeah, okay. Not the Chabad custom, although each should follow their custom. Okay, so the section as far as preparing the Seder. See the 11 halachos, so we did the first. Ourselves to get ready for Pesach by having wine, by having maror, horseradish or romaine lettuce, by having charoises, which is, and a few other ingredients, salt water, shank bone or the neck of a chicken, and a hard-boiled egg. We continue to get ourselves ready for Pesach. Thank you so much for joining and wishing you a wonderful evening. Any questions?
You must improve your acoustic.
What did you say?
You must fix your acoustic. It was all breaking up.
Okay, I think I can do. Thanks for that feedback.
Thanks,
Guys.
Rabbi. Have a good evening.
See you tomorrow.
Everybody. Bye-bye.
Sachi.